Personal logs, tape 106. Ria, personal musings, Aka handler Vincent Fernberg. Security code 911 Sigma 88793210C. It has been quite a while since I managed to gather my thoughts into one place. It has been quite a while since I was even away from the rest of the squad for a few moments. I suppose that is natural. They are all terrified that Marjorie is slowly spiraling out of control. And to be quite frank, I agree with them. Something is different about her, and the way she handles herself is dangerous. Under normal circumstances, I should have put a bullet in her brain a long time ago. I do not know what I am hesitating about. I guess not all questions were meant to be answered. Whatever the case, I guess I am recording this message out of a sense of closure, or at least a need for one. Things are different now, and we have technically completed the mission that we were sent here to perform. A strange sensation, that. I suppose I should tell you what has happened since last time I did a personal musing. Whoever might find this tape, that is. I suppose it will give some entertainment to some separatist force that will laugh at my expense. Or some distant historian will joke about me with his colleagues. We rode the train, that is. We learned a lot more about it as we went along. We even acquired additional members to our squad along the path, and lost some as well. We learned that the train that we had been working on last, or traveling alongside with anyway, was part of a vast network stretching the entirety of the hive. It was once the pride of this world. Hundreds of thousands of kilometers of track. A highly advanced internal system capable of transporting millions of people every minute from one length of this world to the other. I was led to believe that it wasn't just this hive, but many hives adjacent to it as well that were equipped with the transport system. It was built by the original colonists when they arrived upon this world, and had been continually added to ever since. It is strange, then, that the separatists have made no effort to make use of the tracks. We do not have the sufficient technical knowledge to activate its ancient machine spirits, and the Mechanicus is most likely not really in favor of attempting to in the middle of a war zone. But for the enemy not to make use of it at all when they know how to handle it is strange indeed. I fear there was something lurking at the bottom of those tracks, something at the very core of this world that the separatists knew about that we did not. I'm just glad that we never ran into it, and only saw its shadows as we were traveling through the world. After a few days of rest traveling, we eventually arrived at the central station, the key station for all of the tracks, the central focal point. Immediately upon disembarking, we were assaulted by local forces. They were dressed in the supplement gear of the Imperial Guard, at least patchwork reminiscence of it, meaning they're either underhivers who have acquired the gear of the regiment stationed to protect this place, or they are the guardsmen who were supposed to protect it. Which one is true, I do not know. Whatever the case, the battle was fierce. Iskander lost a leg. I still remember his crying face, believing he would never walk again. We battled forward, and though the battle was fierce, we did win. Not without more costs, though. The enemy had a looted Lehman Russ tank. Even if they didn't quite know how to handle it, it was dangerous. It was sheer luck and well-placed bullets from Oren that brought it down. But an indirect shell hit the Commissar and sent him flying. For all intents and purposes, for all that is right in the world, he should have been dead. but he rose up afterwards. But things weren't quite the same with him anymore. He was different, somehow. Like that shell had broken something inside of his head. I suppose it might have. We continued forward into the station, and eventually found ourselves within the structure itself. We tricked the local magus who was still left behind into letting us in, and then explained the situation. Turns out that this place has been guarded by him for the last 30 years. Central station in the command of a loyalist. It was good news, we thought, until it turned out that the magus was not very interested in us at all. We managed to convince him, in return for saving the station and pushing away these intruders, to at least have a look at Iskander. He managed to restore him, ensure that his leg was reattached, or at least a metal simulacrum of a leg anyway. Iskander was out for a solid 4 days on the operating table. When he came back, he wasn't quite the same anymore. Like the commissar, I think he left behind some of his humanity at that station. In his case, however, it was quite literal. He was now more machine than man. Even if that was true even before, now it was true in his soul. He had lost something very important. We didn't ride the train all the way up. For some reason it was decided to be safer if we took the elevators. I think it was Marjorie whispering into the commissar's ear, and this was the first time I was truly starting to suspect that not everything was right with her either. If I had done something back then, would things have turned out differently? Maybe. No matter. The internal elevators of the hive is always very large and quite frequent, if it were. We rode the elevators all the way down to one of their central stations, or rather all the way up, I suppose. Strange to think of it that way. The ride we were on were originally supposed to be transporting goods and wasn't particularly comfortable anyway. But we eventually found the station and the people that had once tried to flee from here and had been gunned down by the separatists. Their corpses must have been lying here for a solid 30 years, waiting for someone to find them. They were little more than bones and charred remains at this point. Inside we found a map to the rest of the hive. We used it to make our way all the way to the top. As we left, I saw another vision of this world. Another example of how time unwinds itself. For some reason, this world does not let time flow freely. Of course, now I know who is manipulating it, but back then we did not. All we saw were the dead coming back to life to look at us as we left. I can still see their faces, their hollow eyes and their bleeding mouths. I am reminded of my sister and her child. I wonder if I will ever get to see them again. Perhaps I am growing sentimental in old age. I would explain why I haven't gotten rid of Marjorie yet. Once we reached the upper part of the hive, we were surprised to find that the Imperial Guard had made advancements. We could hear nearby gunfire, a lot of it as a matter of fact, but more importantly, we heard the sound of a heavy plasma cannon being fired very close to us. Curious, and in the hope that we would run into either the enemy's line or our friendly line, in one way or the other we would find friendlies. What we found instead was something quite different indeed. We took out the enemy positions as they were assaulting a building of some sort. It was little more than a wreckage at this point. Kaiser was still leading the squad back then. Turns out he was rather good at urban warfare. The fight was over after just a few bullets. The separatists weren't exactly expecting us, as it were. With all the forces taken care of, the plasma cannon fire coming from inside the building ceased, and we tentatively approached, calling out our loyalty to the God Emperor as we went. We picked up a transmission coming from inside in very old High Gothic, and what we found when we finally managed to gather up the courage to step inside was and calling it anything short of a god would have been almost tantamount to heresy, but it was an angel, all right. An angel inside of a metal shell. He called himself a dreadnought. His title was Lord of Plasma, and I will not refer to him as anything less than that. A dreadnought. His leg motions had been damaged somehow. The others, it turns out, were able to locate the problem. The leg itself was not damaged, but the joints had been jammed by steel rods. Removing them and gently pushing them back into location seems to manage the dreadnought to become mobile again. I still remember his voice, resonating from deep inside of that metal tomb. He informed us that he was an angel of death, an agent, an angel of the God Emperor himself. He said that with the Hive City in its current state, he could not contact his fellow Astartes. He required the removal of the enemy's void shields to do that. We agreed. We would of course help an angel of death. Besides, taking down the void shield was always one of our secondary mission parameters. We spoke at length with the Astartes as we went. His knowledge was old, and his wisdom was great. Greater than anyone I have ever had the opportunity to speak to. He thanked us multiple times as we traveled. He was a very gentle soul. But when he strode into battle to take out that generatorium, that void generator station, he turned into something quite different. He became an angel of death, all right, scoring down plasma bolt after plasma bolt as we saw the building buckling under his pressure. I am uncertain how many he destroyed in the short few seconds that the battle for that station lasted, but it must have been hundreds. In the end, we were assaulted by the enemy elite forces. We were temporarily driven back, forced to retreat to the Lord of Plasma in his battle. He protected us. Iskander was lit on fire, unfortunately, but seems that steel, or the steel that has replaced his limbs, protected him somewhat. He said he saw something in the chamber he was battling in. Something that made him very quiet. If Iskander had lost his humanity at their operating table, I think that the last vestiges of his soul left him that moment. He clings to the icons of the Omnissiah now, clutches them close whenever he has the opportunity. He mumbles in machine code when he thinks nobody of us listens. I suppose trauma can make a man very religious. The other Astartes showed themselves, as soon as the void shields went down, to retrieve their fallen brother. Their Lord of Plasma. They were kind to us, in a sense. They acknowledged our existence before they left. And the Commissar even managed to convince them to share some of their bounty with us. They had very little items that would be fit as common guardsmen, and of course they wouldn't let us see into their vast armory of hallowed artifacts, but it turns out that they had taken a few items from the hive itself, to be sent to the Imperial Guard, or at least some Imperial vestments of power. Weapons were not to be destroyed, they said, but to be repurposed. If they could not use them, another Imperial Adepta could. They were truly wise in that sense. They made us look through it, and we found some items to make use of. After that, we decided that the only proper path was to head towards the Imperial Bastion of Faith, as we were due to do. Or rather, it was the Commissar's idea once again. I am beginning to suspect that something was not quite right with him from the start. Instead of finishing our mission, he turned us down to this Bastion of Faith. On our path there, we saw what this world was truly all about. We saw the Elder, the dragon. How can I truly describe something that vast? It was a being in the same sense that the sun is technically a thing, and so is a grain of salt. Completely unrelated. It was larger than anything I have ever seen that was still capable of moving. It could have picked up a bane blade and throw it casually across the room like a child with a toy. It was shaped like a giant lizard with wings, a dragon of ancient tale. We learned from this world's archives that that thing was known as an ancient one, or an elder. Once upon a time, these worlds, all of them, were apparently guarded by these beings. This was before the Emperor came to make them part of the Imperium. I suspect that finding this elder dragon is what made them bold enough to turn against the Emperor's light. Though they seemed to have no control over the thing. It attacked anyone it happened to come across. It appeared from nowhere, from the cloud cover, destroyed a few things, and then flew off. We learned later that this thing was what was responsible for the time loops on this world. It wasn't just large, it was capable of manipulating the very time that flew around it. It was said that even the Emperor had issues to slay this thing. Or rather, that he did not have the time to do so, and so he sealed it away instead. The irony. We arrived at the Bastion of Fate to find it demolished, or at least partially so. The structure itself was relatively intact due to its sheer size, but its facades had been broken apart, or bombarded by fire. We found the remnants of an Imperial defensive line. The Sisters of Battle, it would seem, had stood their ground here. Now all that remained were their shattered forms, and their broken bolter weapons. Our orders had been to find out what had happened to the faithful of this world. Whether the Separatists still obeyed the Emperor's command. That was very important. Why, I cannot tell you. However, we found no loyal forces inside of that place. As a matter of fact, we found nothing human inside of that place. Which is not to say that we didn't find anything inside of them. It called itself an Eldar. It was a twisted being. We did the right thing, I think, when we attacked it, but it was not without cost. The Kaiser died to its blades, and so did Apollo. The Commissar was knocked flat by its hidden booby traps. In the end, it forced us all to our knees, and did not kill us. It wanted to parley, as it said. It wanted to talk. We questioned it, and it questioned us in turn. We learned of the nature of the skulls we had been finding, how they were actually bridges into the immaterium, batteries if you would. Its actual purpose, he told us, was as vast and hard to explain as a cognitator's function to a monkey would have been. In the end, the Dark Eldar left us, alone and battered, shattered beyond compare. In our most broken moment, we saw a vision of something. I saw a flame appearing. It whispered into my ear, and I can barely remember what it said. When we all came to, I cannot tell you what happened there. My mind was not truly my own at a few moments. It was like I had wakened from a bad dream, only to find myself surrounded by a halo of light. And as I was rubbing my eyes to get rid of the sleep, it was gone. I knew that we had spoken to a being of some sort. I know that it was something important, but I cannot remember what it told me, only the sense that it was there, that something had stroked my mind, something powerful and vast, something gentle and kind. Was it a vision sent by the Emperor? Maybe. Truth be told, I do not know what I expect. What happened next was... we burned Kaiser's body, and outside we found a remnant of another regiment shortly after. It was like we had been guided to him and he had been guided to us. We called him Mars because the very lengthy code he gave us in place for name was hard to pronounce and even harder to remember. He was a tech priest or a skitari or a warrior of the Mechanicum, one of the three. Quite frankly, I do not know enough of their orders to truly know the difference. All I know is that he had a weapon built into his underarm that he trotted around with to fight with. He had wings of fire on his back and could soar through the sky easily enough. I suppose I should tell you more about the members of the squad that have been replaced since. First up would have been the new arrival that joined us just before we made the assault on the central station down below. He was a man from Necromunda, and his tiny squad, or the tiny squad he was joined in with, was caught in a crossfire. They were originally supposed to, just like us, place beacons. We rescued him and his squad, or at least attempted to. In the end, we could only save 4. 2 of them are now gone, leaving 2 behind. The de facto leader was Guile, and his ally and loader, O'Sullivan. Necromunda was a hive city, just like my own homeworld. He was from the Underhive, however. A street rat that has been acquired by the Imperial Guard, a simple warm body to fire off the heavy guns. He lugged around a mortar wherever he went. He'd managed to save our lives a few times. Turns out he was very good with explosives, even if he did occasionally light his Skandar on fire. This new arrival, however, this new man we met, Mars, he was a tech priest, or at least something of the sort. And it was using his skill that we advanced further ahead. He had been issued here by his Mechanicum masters to find a lost Warhound Titan. I know what you're thinking. How does one lose a Warhound Titan? That is what the Colia Titanica was saying as well. They had issued out their soldiers to find it, but had found no trace so far. Mars's regiment had been caught out of sight. They had been caught up in a separatist force on every side and been destroyed. In their final moments they had scattered to the four winds, trying to fall back. He had been separated from the rest of them. He agreed to join us in our quest, to place the beacon, that is, figuring it would lead him back into Imperial hands, where he could speak to his masters. We didn't want to advance in the open. The city was slowly turning into a crater-filled massacre now that the void shields were down and Imperial guns were pounding it from every corner. So we advanced through the sewers. It was a very hard thing to navigate through, but in the end we came up with one ingenious plan how to navigate. We followed the cabling. It should lead us to some sort of power station, a Mechanicus outpost of some sort. And we weren't wrong. We found one, and we found the remnants of the Skitaric guard that had once guarded it, scattered outside. The station had not been in use by the Separatists, which meant that it had been like this for 30 years. Another relic of the past. Another relic before the Separatists took over. What they actually did once they had taken this world I am beginning to doubt, considering how many things were left to be neglected. I suppose that without the guidings of the God Emperor of Man, things simply fell apart. We continued forward inside of it. The walls were apparently not quite what they were supposed to be. They were closing all around us, opening and closing, creating an impeccable maze that had us swirling around in circles for hours before we found any proper way out of it. In the end, it was Marjorie who mysteriously led the way. We found something in there. I haven't spoken to you much about the black creatures that we saw in the mines, or rather when we exited the mines. The weird things. The black goo that resemble a human, or at least the outlines of a human. It emitted electricity in every corner. Our last packs were charged just by standing close to it. This one was stuck, though, inside a Mechanicus device of some sort. And we released it. It seemed to die after coming in contact with the air. It collapsed onto the ground after looking at us for a few moments, into a puddle. Marjorie, being the Marjorie she is, immediately started playing with the things, and it advised to her armor, climbing over her. For a few moments I thought it would cover her completely in black goo and strangle her. I had my weapon drawn. Had she not gotten it under control, I would have... Who am I kidding? I probably wouldn't have done anything. I am really growing soft. The black substance has attached itself to her armor, and she is unable to remove it. She tells me that it reacts to magnetism, which is why it's attracted to her, seeing as she is capable of manipulating it. I really should have done something. We continued through the hive after that. We eventually made our way to the surface. Using the sewers, we were able to advance towards the hospital without any hit, without encountering any enemy forces. We stormed their location as they had erected a mighty barricade around the hive. We battled left and right. The commissar died in the battle. A heavy bolter took his head off when he was sitting in that vehicle, blew him apart. So many people have died here. I half expect to see them walking around the corner without the time this world flows. Curse that dragon. We found out that the separatists had been transporting themselves using a gun cutter. It made sense. The thing is fast and is capable of transporting a lot of troops. If they had reinforced the hospital, as I suspected, with their elite black guard, which proved to be true, this would be the vehicle they used to transport them. A few well-placed grenades later and we were in command of the gun cutter. We flew it far up into the sky. Inside, we found out a lot of things as well. This gun cutter belonged to a very old friend of us, a man we have continuously run into, or rather run into the corpse of multiple times. Our benefactor and lord. The man was a broken husk when we found him. Apparently he's been through the same thing as we have. Time loops. He was in the mind, after all. I'm not surprised that he's broken. It turns out that the separatists were interested in his ability to bounce back from the dead. Death doesn't seem to want him. Whenever he dies, he simply leaves a corpse behind and stands straight up out of it. I haven't witnessed the effect myself, but I've seen what he leaves behind all too well. Was he immortal? I don't think so. Just very resilient. It was the same thing with the commissar before he finally picked the bullet. Perhaps death finally caught up with him. Just very good at running, that is. He told us about this world and its history. He told us about how the giant dragon flying in the sky was defeated the last time by the Emperor, using the spear he had, and that the spear supposedly was still left somewhere on this world. We had to find it. That's where we're heading next. For now, we flew high up into the sky above the hospital. We found an outcropping that was roughly in line with it and placed a beacon. That's where I am now. This is where I'm sitting now, in the rain. I don't know why I stayed behind. Perhaps I expected to find something out here, in the rain. Perhaps I just wanted closure. Before the swollen gaze of the dark eye do I stand. I hold for him who long ago sacrificed for man. I will yield no ground, I shall take no step back. In his name and for his will, I will never surrender. Pierce my flesh, break my bones, take my lives, these matter not. In my sacrifice ye of the dark gods shall know defeat, for even in death shall we be triumphant in his name. Lo, I have fallen in battle for he and his flock. Prepare my place, O Lord. I shall stand by thy side until the end times, until thy will be done. Amor imperata, fiata justica. Go forth in his name. Farewell, my friends, ye who have died on this world. End of recording.